Yay, 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 peeps! We are back with Build Your Dream Network and our virtual water cooler. And we started this last year, the beginning of the pandemic, when we thought that the pandemic was just going to be quick and easy and over. Ha ha on us. And so now I'm back doing this again because some of you have missed it, but doing it on video. So we got a little history. You can keep this rather than just a bunch of tweets that people have to go and find. And I'm thrilled to be here with Caitlin Harper, who is, if you don't know her, you should be following her on Twitter. See, we got her Twitter handles happening, right? And and Caitlin is a communications expert, and she's also a avid reader of nonfiction books, which as a nonfiction book author, my hat tip to you, because how many book clubs and stuff actually talk about nonfiction books? And there's so many nonfiction books out there, so much, career, business, self-help kind of stuff. Rather than having an algorithm telling you what to read, we got Caitlin to tell us what to read. So you've got a couple of great book recommendations, and I want to hear all about them.
Yeah. I know we're talking about careers today, and something I talk about a lot. Oh, sorry. Okay, fun. Okay, cool. I talk to a lot of people about, especially nowadays, especially people who are like doing career searches or pivots. That's a big one as well. People who are like, how do I change careers? How do I do this and that? People are really afraid of how many times they've switched jobs, how many companies they worked for, how many states or countries they've worked in. And everyone is still like under this really archaic impression that that's all like a bad thing.
That was a bad thing when you graduated from high school in 1980.
I know.
Like I did, right? Like that's so archaic, that thinking. Anyway, so please, people, don't worry.
I equate it to like the idea of like a pension. I'm like, the person you're speaking to is still talking about the idea that and like, I know people who have pensions now, but it's small, right? So like, I'm not saying that we don't need, same thing with like specialists and generalists. We need specialists for sure, just like people still have pensions. Totally awesome. If anyone has a pension, they know where I can get one. I love it. But I feel like the way that we're working these days and the way the industries are, like the majority of industries, those generalists are what is needed because they have the problem solving skills necessary to solve the problems that are happening in the world like today. And I actually used to like joke around. I was like, oh, you don't really need to be a specialist like unless you're a surgeon or whatever. And I was like, if you're a doctor, like be a specialist. And then I recently read a study about how like people when there's like a cardiac conference going on, cardiac surgeon conference, people who have surgery during the cardiac surgeon conference, when the cardiac surgeons are at the conference, have a lower mortality rate because the surgeons who are left behind actually have a wider range of skills and can prescribe medication. I know. I was like, I read this, I was like, oh no, this is terrible.
And they can't make this shit up category.
It's literally a joke. It's a joke that like you want to have a heart attack in the lobby of the cardiac surgeon, convention, and that joke is not a thing because it's like not true. So yeah, I'm a generalist myself. I actually haven't done a tally for like a couple of years, but I've had a W-2 from more than 30 places in my life, and I've worked for myself more than once. So I've had many, many jobs. I'm very much a generalist, and I love talking to other people who struggle with how to tell that story. What do you do thing, right? So yeah, are we talking about books? We can talk about books.
Yeah. So there was a couple of books like that. Oh, okay. So the dream book for generalists. And, yeah. Okay.
My two favorites for generalists are these two. So this one I read a couple of years ago. I actually read it right after I read your book.
Were you on a nonfiction book written by women from British Columbia, Canada? Was that the genre you were after?
From Canada. I know. I was like, how am I reading these books by these people? Like, and I lived in British Columbia for a little while. I'm not Canadian, but I did live in British Columbia for a little while. And that was before this. So I was like, maybe I just like sense them, that they exist and that they're geniuses and I love them. So yeah, this book was really cool. And I like the little like, you know, subscript, a guide for those who still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And that spoke to me. I was like, this cover's cool anyway. Because I very much was like, what are you supposed to be? Right. And even now with the whole like journalists are amazing and everyone needs them and it's an incredible thing to be, there's still this like find your purpose, like find your passion, like be an expert and all that stuff. And like being an expert is amazing, but I've always been described as a jack of all trades and like a Renaissance person and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, how do I formulate my passions and my skills, more importantly, into a job or a career, right? Because when I was starting out, people were like, you're going to be, you know, an office manager for the rest of your life, which is not a problem. But because I was an English major, they were like, you can be a teacher or you can be an administrative assistant or office manager. Those are the two options for English majors, especially since you want to be a writer. You're going to be a starving artist. You're going to be, you know, you're going to make minimum wage. And I was just like, okay. And like kind of like internalized all that stuff and like took me a while to like figure out exactly how my skills and interests manifested themselves into a role. But yeah, this is amazing. If you are into like, if you have your Hogwarts house or your Myers-Briggs in your Twitter profile, this is a book for you. Because she kind of breaks it down into these different like working models, like models of how you are, how you work, or, you know, how your interests come together. There's the Einstein approach, the Phoenix approach, the group hug approach, and the slash approach. So those are like the four that she talks about in the book.
Group hug might not be appropriate for this.
I know, it'd be like very masked, like a group like wave.
Virtual group hug.
Yeah, I know. Maybe she needs to do like another modern one. Even though, yeah, it came out like 3 years ago or something. But she's probably like, oh, group hug, no.
No. If we could group hug, you would be a group hug person. Okay, that's amazing. And so really helping someone who's got maybe there is a common thread between various things, and maybe part of this is a willingness, like an interest in continually learning, or maybe there is a preference with one particular skill set they have, but they can see lots of places where they could perhaps apply it. This book might be a good one for someone in that category.
Yeah, for sure. If you're like, I don't know how to talk about this, I don't even know if this is right. Like a lot of people are like, do I need to find a specialty? Do I need to choose now? Like, what's my major going to be? Or like, I don't think I want to leave my job because I've already sunk so much time into it. And I'm like,
right.
leave. No. Like, if you're already considering leaving, just go. Pursue something new. So it's very much, yeah.
Yeah, think about someone who's invested a lot. There's that whole idea that when you've invested a lot, you've also attained a certain stature, and often with that means resources and salary. Mm-hmm. Is this book helpful for someone in that situation where they could really express their value, even being able to say, yes, I may not have worked in your industry, or I may not have particularly done that, but I've done all of these things, therefore I shouldn't come in at an entry level.
Yeah, very much. There's like a strategy section in each little section of like what type of person you are. There's a strategy section in each section for that type of person. And then there's an additional strategy section that covers things like imposter syndrome and all that stuff for like, this is how you need to talk about this. And that is really important because that's the number one thing. Like I teach about imposter syndrome a lot, and I coach people, you know, like how to tell their story and how to talk about themselves and that. And two things that I find people who are like this, who are generalists, or she calls the people multi-potentialites. That's her word for it.
I like that.
I like it too. I was like, I love a good word, a good made up word. Let's do this. People say but instead of and. So, oh yeah, I work there, but I'm only an assistant, or yeah, I'm a writer, but I only write on the weekends or whatever. So getting rid of but and saying, and I do this, right? Like, oh yeah, I am, a, video production assistant, and I also have my own YouTube channel or something, not but. And then people say despite, or probably synonyms for despite. I don't think people use despite in their normal speech, but instead of saying despite my background or my varied experience or whatever, because of, right? Because of my English degree, I have a greater degree of empathy because I've read a million books and I understand the human experience, right? Not despite my English degree, you should still hire me to do, communication strategy or whatever, right? Like I'm like a very left brain, right brain person. So doing this like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I do art. Like it's not a thing it's something that I used to say, but it's not something that I say anymore. So it's because of my varied experience. I'm amazing at everything, right? Like, come on.
No, I'm removing button. I'm not noticing our friend Neil here. Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Neil. Like removing but, like it is so hard. And I think putting those things there, but it's also what you're saying to me, this how to be everything in terms of really helping people script their story, how all these to somebody else, all these disparate pieces align up and show, I'm gonna say the building, looking at these disparate pieces as building blocks and how this all kind of, works together. Now, the other book, Range. Tell me about that one.
This is the last book that I read in 2020, and I got it from the library, thank God. Because that's my one happiness this year has been when the library opened back up, and now you can put everything on hold and go pick it up, and I have like my whole system. But when the library like wasn't really available for a couple months, I died. It was very sad. So I got it from the library. So it's Range: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. So this one is like these two together is like superpower. This one's great if you're like you get on a Zoom with your parents for the holiday and they ask you why you haven't settled into your thing yet or why you're switching jobs again. It's like so full of case studies, and it's very like Malcolm Gladwell style writing. So it's like all the case studies, he actually references this is not the first place that I read it, but he references the cardiac surgeon study in this book. And I was like, I knew that. But it's really cool. And he starts off talking about how, like, for example, like if you watch The Queen's Gambit, which I did, everyone's getting back into the mode of like, you have to be a child of prodigy. Like you need to be like a chess player when you're, 6 years old. He talks about chess players, and he also talks about like the Tiger Woods kind of idea that you need to be like obsessed with something from childhood on. And then he also talks about, is it Roger Federer, tennis player? I know tennis. So it's literally, the first chapter is literally like Roger versus Tiger. And like, apparently he didn't play tennis when he was younger. I think his mom was a tennis instructor. He played a bunch of different sports, did all this different stuff, started really late, and is obviously like amazing. And like David Epstein, the author, goes through and he's like, to be honest, most people are generalists. Most people go through different stages, and studies have actually shown that like the Tiger Woods phenomenon is like not great, even when it comes to sports and things that people think you should like specialize in really early. Very rarely does it actually happen that way. I think it's like, more people who win gold medals and things like that have greater range and started later. And there's all these graphs. There's a lot of graphs in it. I like a good graph. But yeah, it's really cool. I just love, and it's like very, very varied. So it talks about like all different industries and everything, like very, very cool science and all sorts of stuff. But it was awesome. And it's just like reaffirming.
Well, I mean, we can put some of the stuff in the context of the economy. and the way the world is right now, that actually being much more nimble, being, having, if your skill set is your ability to learn and grasp new skills as opposed to master a single skill, that would hold you well because of this new economy. I'm also kind of like, well, let's just put that on hold. This kind of, let's look for a real technical term, bullshit that some of us were fed when we were, in high school, that we had to, pick what you want to do and put your head down and do good work and, get the job for life. And then at 65, you were going to get, figure out what you were retired and your life was going to begin. Or, rather than thinking, right, like your career may not happen, says one from experience, may not happen until later in life.
Right.
And trying a bunch of things might finally get you to the place where you want to be.
Right. That's like, we only learn about ourselves through experience, right? And it's like, other studies have shown that there's so many people who go to law school or go to med school or whatever and either drop out because they're like, this is not what I wanted, or they start and then either they feel so guilted that they continue and then they're miserable, or they end up dropping it later on as well. And then, whatever, they're at the ripe old age of 35 or something, and they're like, what do I do? And I'm like, welcome to the 35-year-old party. None of us know what we're doing. Like, great. I was like, one job your whole life? Oh my goodness. Let me take you on a wild ride of LinkedIn, and we can find what all the real jobs are. Because that was the other thing. Like, what are even jobs, right? Like, my parents work for the government and are a teacher, right? So the available jobs were teacher, admin. Like, what did I see other people doing? And like, I was in like ballerina, soccer player, astronaut, lawyer mode until I was like 18. And I was like, what are options? And for a while I was studying psychology in college, and I had a double major in psychology and English. And I got to my sophomore year, and my guidance counselor was like, if you're not going to become a psychologist, you should not double major in psychology. Like, don't even study this unless you were going to become a psychologist. And I was like, I don't think I am. So I dropped it to a minor, and then I actually ended up doing 2 other minors as well, which makes a lot more sense for my life. So I minored in linguistics, entrepreneurship, and psychology. And if you connect the dots back through my life, that is exactly what I'm doing right now. So at the time, I pursued my interests, which is like, it is a privileged thing to do. I was also working the entire time, but it's a privileged thing to do to pursue your interests. But I knew that, like, if I learned enough things and connected them myself and figured out how to use all those skills in whatever job I had. So that's the other thing. I did operations for my entire career, but my operations jobs were always communication and people focused, because those are my skills. So using whatever skills you have in whatever role you have, I think, is a really generalist, like, positive thing. And then knowing how to talk about it.
Well, but I think one of the things you're really hitting on in terms of like education, we've been so fixated on like, what are you going to specialize in, and forcing people into that kind of mindset sausage factory to spit out these specialists at a younger age, rather than designing education systems, including higher education, just to think. And, like, talk about my extraordinary privilege, being Canadian and going to university at a time where I won't even tell you what I paid to do 2 degrees, because I will have hate mail like no one's business. But, I mean, I could go, because I see, like, joking here from our friend Neil, who would go to law school, right? But
right.
I could go to law school as a way of getting an advanced degree and a way of saying this is a way to be curious, and analytical skills and communication skills. And if I don't do this thing, who cares? And as an aside, when you talk about, why we, like, when we figure out what we want to do and where our interests are, my best friend in law school was an airline pilot. And he'd been an engineer. That's when he got his original degree from UBC in the 70s. He then became a pilot. He then went to, when I met him and he was in law school, he was in his 40s.
Yeah, he's probably doing pretty well. On a million things. It's like, it does make sense. Like, so I do a lot of consulting now, and everyone's like, oh, do you have your MBA and you're a consultant? I'm like, no. Like, what I do change management consulting. I didn't even know what change management was when I started managing change, right? I was like, oh, this is just my job that I do. And then someone eventually was like, you know, companies hire out like external consultants for a lot of money to do what you're doing. And I was like, tell me more about that. I was like, what are you talking about? This is just my operations job. And they were like, no, dummy. Like, they should have hired a project manager for that, not you. And I was like, interesting. So it's just like, it's a varied like area, right? And everything that I do is communication focused, always. And that's where, when I manage change, I'm thinking about the user experience. I'm thinking about how people are gonna, hear this change. What's going on? When I do DE&I stuff, it's the same thing, right? What's the story? What do we need to sell this to leadership with? And blah, blah, blah. Like, it's all communication focused.
Yes.
So I think when people say, like, find your passion, they mean like that. Like, my passion is empathy, communication, psychology, storytelling. I do a lot of different things with that. They don't mean find your passion role, they mean find that. But a lot of these like find your passion things are like almost like personality tests for jobs. Like, those old kind of quizzes you took when I was in college, and they were like, which kind of psychologist do you want to be? And I'm like, why am I taking this quiz? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Like crazy kind of put you on the spot kind of stuff. But how do you answer that? How would you say to someone to answer that question?
What question?
Like, if you were in an interview and someone said, what's your passion?
What's my passion? I would say people-focused communication is my passion. And then if someone's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But that's another thing. So the number one thing to do when you're figuring out how to tell your story is to make it clear, concise, user-focused, and goals-focused, right? So if I was in an interview for the VP of content management, I wouldn't answer that passion question the same way I would answer it if someone was hiring me to do change management consulting, because those are two different goals.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's another thing. People are like, write your mission statement, right? I have like 10 mission statements. I have a doc called Mission and Values, and my Google Drive has a million different, like, what does Caitlin Harper do? There's like 1,000 lines, right? Because there's a lot of different things that I can do and that I have done. So it totally, totally depends on what the goal of the situation is and who the listener is.
Yes.
To how I answer questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's always the problem when people, I want to say, with cover letters, resumes, outreach, conversations, like, people always want the template. Like, what do I say? And it's like,
right.
Who's receiving the information? Like, what's the context and who is the other person?
Right.
So yeah. Otherwise, that the whole thing absolutely,
Yeah. That's why I feel bad when people are like, I sent out 1,000 resumes and, I did the work. I swapped out the stuff. And I'm like, what are we swapping out exactly? And I was like, what are we doing? And I was like, I don't want you to waste your time with this stuff, but like, you can't just literally swap out a sentence like it. And I don't want people to spend a million, billion, trillion years on cover letters or whatever, but like, really think about who you're speaking to, right? Like, I don't know. And you say this in your book too. It's like who knows what you know, right? I say that to people all the time. People are like, well, I do a lot of things. And I'm like, who knows that? Who knows that? And what do they know? Because people will be like, oh, Caitlin, she is like really great at like facilities. And I'm like, A, don't tell anyone that. I don't want to do it anymore. And B, like, I need to update people on like what I do, because sometimes it's out of date, right? It's not what I'm doing right now.
Right. Like, the difference if you had your LinkedIn profile that had your operations role and you led with facilities as opposed to leading with communication.
Right. Like, I've all been changed around. I'm like, I don't ever want to do facilities again. No one contact me about it. I'm very good at it.
I was at it, and well, just the same way that I was damn good at, editing prospectuses and staying up 24/7, getting SEC filings done. Don't call me on that, folks.
No. I have a Post-it on my office wall that says, "Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you have to do it." Because people ask me all the time to do shit that I'm good at that I don't want to do. It's awful.
You know what? That's like hit something, and I think this is, both of these books may have talked about this, and this is why I'm loving this conversation, because amongst other things that I get to talk to you is, there's so many books out there to read. When do you oh God, which one am I going to read now? And understanding and getting these recommendations. Either of these books talk about 360 reviews and getting those kind of feedbacks on maybe what you're good at, the reason I say that is I found that having a 360 review, was a formal one, really helped me distinguish between, like you said, facilities, like what I'm really good at and what I want to do, which can be two different things altogether. And I think there's so many times where we may think, oh, well, I'm not good at this. But the fact of the matter is, you're quite good at it. You just don't want to do it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I got one 360 review in my career, and it was like one of the most helpful things ever.
Yeah.
And I find my job. So neither of these books talk about that, but a book that might talk about that, another really good career book that came out, I think 2-3 years ago, The New Rules of Work.
Yes.
By the founders of the Muse.
Yeah, excellent.
That's a really, really good career book, especially if you are that type of person who has, no offense to parents, but parents who are like, you gotta, go knock on the door of the business you want to work at. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't tell me to do that. So no, The New Rules of Work is really, really good. And I feel like there is a section where they do talk about either just performance reviews or like new ways to do performance reviews. I feel like they probably talk about 360 reviews in that. That's an amazing career book, as is Pivot by Jenny Blake. That's another amazing career book. If you're changing careers, really, really good.
Yeah. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Like all this good advice. Yeah, one of the things I often say to people is if you're in an office environment, work environment where they have 360 reviews, run towards it, get it. Because you know what? Not only just to do the job you're doing right now, but sort of as you think about wanting to make changes, do things, it could give you some really great insights there. And if you don't have that situation, like just email, like pick a range of people and email them and just ask them one question. What do you think I do well?
Mm-hmm.
And
in your book.
What's that?
You talk about that in your book, right? You say email a couple people, ask them what I do well. I feel like that's definitely in Build Your Dream.
Or I've talked about it. My poor, look at this.
Mm-hmm. My looks like that too.
It's like,
oh no. Okay, mine's not that bad. I have my own hardcover of your book that I use the most, and then I have like the sad paperback that's falling apart. It's so sad. And then I always have an unused spare copy to give to people as a gift. Everyone's like, why do you have 3 copies of this book? I'm like,
it's a damn good book, people.
I know. I was like, you can tell if I like a book if you walk in and there's 2 copies, because that means one copy is ready to be given away and the other copy belongs to me.
Oh, this one belongs to me. Well, I can't wait to find out what you're reading next, but I don't want you to tell me now because I'd rather, come in. Oh, here, look at there. Let's do this. Look at that.
I have a couple other ones on deck. I have actually I have 2 books that came out this year or very late last year that are on deck that are amazing, and I can't wait to talk about them.
So everyone if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube watching this, you better get over to Twitter and find Neil Wainwright, founder of Up Habit, because he is, Up Habit is app for help connectors become more super at connecting people and building your network in a really great, meaningful way. And Neil has been a champion of Build Your Dream Network, as well as other really solid networking books. So, go follow Neil and hit him up, and also find out about Up Habit is my little recommendation there. Well, I would love to find out get you to come back and have this conversation selfishly so I can see you in a lovely socially distanced way, and find out what else you're reading, because hey, algorithms are all delightful, but finding someone and having written a book, I know that you can get all sorts of fancy bold-faced names to provide recommendations for books, but actually finding someone who's read one and how they put it to use in the context is something special. So so all right, you've got a couple of good books. Let me know when you're ready. We'll come back and do this again.
I will.
And you know what, Caitlin, this has been awesome.
Thank you, Neil.
I God love StreamYard. It makes me happy. So good to see you. I'm going to hit end broadcast and we'll have funny faces until that happens. And we'll talk again soon. And thank you for these books. Oh, hold the books up again one more time. Our book recommendations for this virtual watercooler: Range and How to Be Everything.
Yeah. And if I can quickly plug Comcotery, I will.
Oh, please. Oh, yes, please, please, please. Communications expert with peer mentorship, coaching.
Yeah. So I have a communication consultancy. Part of the consultancy is our free communication Slack community. And we match up for peer coaching. So if you are interested in learning how to coach or just using coaching tools in your everyday conversation, I do our signature workshop for free every month. There's loads of premium workshops and coaching and other things. But yeah, our free coaching community is super cool. We just started a wellness channel in 2021. We're all doing yoga together, some self-communication and breathing. But yeah, our free peer coaching program is super awesome. And matchups are starting again next week, and they go up here. So
when we're over on Twitter and retweeting this, we'll make sure we put all of that in there. And before we go, and thank you for this on top of the books. Breathe, the 30-day yoga. Thank you. Life-changing.
So good. I know. So good. I love yoga with Adrienne. She's my favorite person. Don't tell my husband. My favorite person in the entire world.
I thought it was me. What do you mean?
You're third. You're third after my husband. He has to be second. If he beats him, he needs number 2. That just
he does. Listen, I'm happy to be solid number 3. I will take the bronze medal. I'm on it. All right, it's been so fun hanging at the virtual water cooler with you, and we'll do this again soon. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.